Thank you.
The next amendment is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk titled Sherrill ELCP 011.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee print offered by Ms. Sherrill of New Jersey, identifier ELCP _011.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes on behalf of her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak today about an issue that will be crucial to the success of our national reopening and recovery efforts, providing affordable childcare for all families across the United States. And before I launch into this issue and the impacts it has on families all across the country, I want to express my sincerest thanks and appreciation to the chairman and to the committee for their support of this amendment and their work to ensure we're investing in childcare that works for every single family across the country. The economic effects of this pandemic have not been equal for different parts of the country. Working parents, particularly mothers, have suffered significant job and income losses as school and daycare closures have forced them to leave the workforce, and many have not returned. An estimated 1.2 million parents left the workforce between February and October of last year. And the Census Bureau found that on average during the pandemic, 10% of working mothers reported not working each week because they were providing care for their child. During the first wave of COVID-19 cases last April, labor force participation fell by 3.2 percentage points among married mothers with a child under age 6 and by 4.3 percentage points among married mothers with a child ages 6 to 12. These decreases, if sustained, would represent a monumental erosion of the progress we've made over the past 3 decades in helping women to enter the workforce. Quite frankly, not enough progress, because a 5% decline in women's labor force participation would undo the past 25 years of progress. This is not just a problem of the past, but instead continues to impact our economic recovery. In July, men gained 7 times the number of jobs that women did. Labor force participation for women ages 25 to 54 also fell last month, while that of similarly aged men continued to rise. It is no surprise that the resurgence in COVID-19 cases in July disproportionately affected parents and women who have again had to deal with school and daycare closures. As I've gone on small business walks throughout my district and spoken with business owners, I've constantly heard how the inability to hire workers has significantly impacted our economy's reopening and recovery process. This issue is fundamentally linked to this lack of childcare, and we won't be able to fully recover until we also help working parents to re-enter the workforce. To make matters even more dire, this crisis in our daycare system has only worsened an institution that was already overburdened before the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, there was only 1 childcare spot available in New Jersey for every 2 children who needed care. Today, that number is just 1 spot for every 5 children. It is clear we can't go back to the child care policies that existed pre-pandemic, but instead must create a new system that guarantees affordable, high-quality care for every family that needs it. That's why I'm so pleased that the Build Back Better Act includes a once-in-a-generation investment in child care access for families. This legislation will ensure that middle-class families no longer pay upwards of 20% of their income on care, and will make sure that no family is unable to access child care in the first place due to cost. It also makes critical investments in our childcare workforce and expands the number of childcare centers across the country, crucial steps to increasing access to care. I applaud Chairman Scott and the entire Education and Labor Committee for these critical investments that will make a truly meaningful difference in the lives of my constituents. However, I'm offering this amendment because I know we can make this legislation even stronger by making this childcare program available to all Americans. For so many people across the country, particularly in high cost of living states like New Jersey, the current eligibility limitations will make affordable childcare still difficult to access. This will result in working families still having to pay significant portions of their income on childcare and will cause many working women to leave the labor force entirely due to this lack of affordable access. For my constituents, building a generational new system of affordable childcare that will finally help working parents to enter the workforce and then excluding them from it will represent a severe blow to their faith in the federal government. New Jersey already pays over $10 billion more in federal taxes than we receive in federal spending, and I will not let another federal program pay less to New Jersey taxpayers than all other Americans. So for these reasons, I'm proud to introduce an amendment to this bill to make our investment in child care truly accessible to all Americans. In doing so, we'll guarantee that every child has access to high quality care and will ensure that working parents, particularly mothers, can re-enter the workforce. We will also help to solve our worker shortage, create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and boost incomes across the economy. Again, I want to extend my thanks to the chairman and the committee for their work with us on this amendment and your support for it. It's hard to adequately highlight just how big of a win these investments will be for every single family around the country, and we can be proud of what we will be accomplishing by including it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlelady's time has expired. The ranking member, the gentlelady from North Carolina, Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
You know, I cannot believe this amendment. It makes an irresponsible bill even worse. As many of my colleagues and I have said, if you want to have a conversation improving childcare, let's gather in a bipartisan way to improve the existing programs. We all know people struggling to pay for childcare. Instead, what we are considering now is an amendment that appears to remove the modicum of fiscal responsibility that was in one of the many duplicative, unnecessary childcare programs. Once again, the Democrats are working hard to spend taxpayer funds on higher income individuals without a concern about the businesses they are encumbering and the families struggling to make it all work. As we read this amendment, it appears that you have left in the checking that no one can have more than $1 million in assets, which is a lot of assets, but you have left off the $1 million income cap, so that with an individual being able to spend no more than 7% of their income, people could be making $1 million and pay $70,000 for childcare. And my colleagues are talking about affordable, high quality childcare. Well, yeah, you can buy a lot of high quality childcare for $70,000, while middle income people are struggling to pay several $100s a week out of their pay. And yes, many of them are paying 20 and 30 and 40%. And it is not going to be one bit difficult to access childcare if you're able to spend $70,000. This is outrageous, Mr. Chairman, absolutely outrageous. Put this in with what Ways and Means is going to talk about, and that is taking off the $10,000 cap for your second, third, fourth, fifth billion-dollar home if you need to pay taxes on it. And the Democrats have become the party of the rich. Don't talk to us about being the party of the poor anymore. This amendment is absolutely irresponsible. We need to be helping low-income people, not the wealthiest people in this country. And I am absolutely mortified that you would even consider such a piece of legislation when people are struggling. And in my area, people are working. They're going back to work. They're paying for childcare. They're sacrificing to work. They're paying more for gas. They're paying more for food. And they're struggling in this abominable economy that President Biden and the Democrats have created because of the inflation you're creating. Honestly, I don't know how you can hold your heads up when you're talking about this kind of an amendment on this bill. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm so proud to have co-authored this amendment with Representative Sherrill. I was raised by a single mom who got help raising me from my grandparents. When daycare was too expensive, my grandmother took me to work with her cleaning homes. Earlier this year, my grandmother, who grew up in Jim Crow, Virginia, and never received a college education, got to see her 33-year-old grandson sworn into the United States Congress. But my story is the exception rather than the rule. According to a report published by the Center for American Progress, children that have access to high quality childcare have better social, cognitive, and verbal development outcomes. These same children were also shown to have better reading, writing, and math skills. Crafting the childcare provisions to provide universal affordability is not simply a matter of making the program bigger. It's about giving our children the tools they need to thrive. Mr. Chairman, under your strong, visionary, and transformative leadership, we have the opportunity to do something in this hearing that no chair before you has ever accomplished in the history of the United States Congress. We have the opportunity to pass a truly universal child care program that leaves no American family left behind in the richest nation in the history of the world. And I have never been more proud to be a member of this committee. Much has been said about what people making over 200% of state median income can and cannot afford. I represent a district where many of my constituents making over 200% of the state median income still struggle to afford childcare. I have met with these people, so I know that their struggle is real, especially given the high cost of living in Westchester and in Rockland counties. And just a quick point in response to what the ranking member said earlier. If it is true that $70,000, in other words, 7% of $1 million is sufficient to cover the cost of childcare, then she is conceding that this bill would do nothing to subsidize the childcare for such high income earners. Therefore, she has introduced a straw man. This is especially true, this struggle of affordability that I identified, in single parent households where people make over 200% of the state median income. Childcare was already inaccessible for many families before the pandemic due to cost and quality. Now, in the wake of this pandemic, parents are dealing with reduced childcare options, increased financial hardships, and an uncertain future with respect to remote work. We must pass this amendment to meet the needs of all Americans and help relieve this burden on all families. Childcare is the most transformative investment that we are considering today in this markup, and easily one of the most well-known and transformative provisions in the entire Build Back Better legislation. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment to ensure that these investments have the broadest possible reach and guarantee affordability for all American families. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone else seek recognition?
Chairman.
Just a minute. Anybody on the
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on. Does anybody on the minority side seek recognition? If not, gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am so proud to be a co-sponsor of this amendment with my colleagues, and also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your tremendous leadership on helping us to ensure that every single child can access childcare, that our program is truly universal and fair by ensuring that every family pays no more than 7% of their income on childcare. Every parent, regardless of income, should be able to have the ability to care for their families. On average, Washington households already spend 14% of their income on childcare. And in Seattle, childcare costs $2,400 a month per child, rivaling what it costs to go to college. Every member of this committee wants working families who continue to bear the brunt of the economic impact of the pandemic to have childcare options that they can actually afford. Unfortunately, too many still continue to be priced out of receiving quality childcare. Investing in childcare without addressing affordability harms our communities, particularly in metro areas and suburban areas across the country that have done the right thing and raised wages, perhaps even passed $15 minimum wage laws, and are housing poor, so they have enormously high housing prices. Working families, teachers, single moms, middle-class families are struggling in this situation to simply survive, much less to get affordable childcare. This amendment ensures that we recognize these realities for families across the country and that we leave no one out. It is truly a universal program. The investment brought about by this amendment will also have long-lasting impacts on our economy. Parents cannot return to work if they can't afford childcare. We know that parents with young children, but women in particular, have faced great challenge in re-entering the workforce due to a lack of affordable options. A recent study from the National Women's Law Center and the Center on Poverty and Social Policy found that investing in affordable, high-quality childcare for every family means that needs it would increase the number of women with young children working full-time by 17%. That's monumental change for generations of women, and it helps to narrow the lifetime earnings gap between women and men. Investing in the early development of our children is a shared priority of every member of this committee. We all recognize the connection between quality childcare and social, emotional, and cognitive growth in a child. Cost should not be a barrier in ensuring that working families have that same opportunity. This amendment recognizes that and ensures that all children, regardless of their family's income, have that head start. Now, I respectfully would submit that I'm not sure that our colleague from North Carolina understands what this amendment says. It caps automatically the amount so that no family will pay more than 7% of their income. But if the cost of childcare is less than that, then obviously that family is covering the entire cost. So when you have that $1 million family with $70,000 as their 7% share, then they are not going to get any money from the government. So we have naturally instituted the income cap here to ensure that families pay and it's proportional to their income. Now, I recognize that this amendment on its own will not address families being inundated with unnecessary administrative paperwork. And so one of my priorities is to work with my colleagues to advance an investment that prioritizes ease of access for communities of the lowest incomes. Allowing universality, as this amendment proposes, is the first step to setting families, our economy, and of course our children on the best path to addressing the scale of the childcare affordability crisis. I urge my colleagues to join me in investing in a truly universal program by supporting this amendment. It is transformational. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Does anyone on the minority side seek recognition? If not, the gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word and rise in support of this amendment, which I am happy to co-sponsor.
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Not every parent has a family member who is willing to help them take care of their child while they go to work or school. Those parents are then tasked with navigating the complex landscape of the childcare system, finding an available spot amid the patchwork of programs at an affordable and quality facility. Expanding equity and access are the core tenets of all of my work here in Congress, and moving our child care system closer to true universality has been something I have advocated for since I was elected. I'm so proud to be taking a vote on a measure that even a few years ago seemed impossible, to ensure that no family has to spend more than 70% on critical child care for their families. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, childcare is only affordable if it costs no more than 10% of a family's income. Currently, middle-class families are paying about 14% of their income on childcare. So I thank the chair and the committee staff for working so closely with the members to make affordable childcare a reality. In my state of Connecticut, we are ranked 6th out of 50 states for the most expensive infant care. Data compiled by Child Care Aware shows that while the average mortgage payment in my state is about $24,000, the average annual cost of tuition at a public higher education institution costs about $12,000. The cost of center-based childcare averages about $15,000. Connecticut is one of 33 states where infant care is more expensive than the cost of college tuition. Infant care in Connecticut costs about 37% more per year than in-state college tuition. Think about that. Just think about that. Care for one child averages only about 7% less than rent. And while the cost can be a significant burden for parents of all incomes, simply finding a center can also be challenging. Finding high quality, affordable childcare can sometimes seem insurmountable for parents. According to the Center for American Progress, there are 97 census tracts in my district that can be classified as childcare deserts. We have to act now to fix this problem. The high cost and availability of childcare impacts every family from all income levels. Every family. That's because childcare is also about the child. Giving children a chance at access to education early, at socialization skills, at basic learning skills, provides them with sets them up with a future for success. That's what all of our children need, and we all benefit from that. So childcare, while we're talking about the cost of it and the impact of it, it is also about the child, and we owe it to our children to set them up for success. I also would like to add to this conversation that in my state, and I'm sure in yours, the highest income earners are not the ones on the wait list at the YMCA. They're not the people who can't find childcare. They're not the people who can't afford childcare. It is the lowest income earners, the most vulnerable people, the people who are making less than minimum wage, the people who are scraping together all they can to go back to work. Like you said, ranking member, the people who are making a sacrifice. So while anecdotally we'll always find people who aim to take advantage, the people who will benefit this program are not millionaires who will now send their kids to public centers just to get over on the system. It is the people who truly want to work and be a part of our thriving and growing economy. We owe it to them to help them. This amendment brings us closer to the promise of true universality and increases the quality of life and economic security for every family. It gets women back to work. It gets our workplaces up and running. It helps our children grow and thrive. While we saw that 92% of women did not return back to work or were shut out of the workforce, for many of them, the reason is childcare. So let's vote yes for this amendment, get women back to work, get families back on track, and set up our young people for success, for future success. I urge all of my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Are there others that wish to be recognized?
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, gentlelady from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to participate in this childcare discussion because I find it neither outrageous nor irresponsible that we would invest in high quality childcare. On the contrary, this investment is good for our children, good for our families, and good for the economy as well. This is a responsible investment that is going to help our families. And as we have seen, even before the pandemic, where here in Oregon, every county was a childcare desert. This is an investment that is going to help everyone. Simply put, every child deserves access to high quality childcare, and it's an investment in our future. So there's a professor at University of Chicago, Professor James Heckman. He's a Nobel Memorial Prize winner in economics. And here's what he said. Short-term costs are more than offset by the immediate and long-term benefits through reduction in the need for special education and remediation, better health outcomes, reduced need for social services, lower criminal justice costs, and increased self-sufficiency and productivity among families. Colleagues, this is a good investment. And this is something that we should be doing for our families, for our children, and for our economy. I wanted to add that to the conversation and urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition? If not, I recognize myself to speak briefly on the amendment. I would just like to say, first of all, that I agree with all the comments about the need for childcare and all the good it does. But the measure before us is an amendment. Several comments have been made about my support for this amendment. I think the members of this committee are well aware that I believe that the underlying bill is more than generous in terms of benefits. And the reason that I'm giving credence to this amendment is because without it, the members of the committee are threatening to jeopardize the entire bill. To suggest that therefore I support the amendment going from the more than generous provisions in the underlying bill is, I think the members of the committee know that that's not my preference. Having said that, I would hope that we would adopt the underlying bill, that we have the opportunity for transformational difference in the legislation. There's a lot of good in the legislation, but in terms of this particular amendment, if that's what it takes to get the rest of the bill over the mark, then okay. But I would not want that suggested, that therefore I support increasing the benefits from the overly generous provisions in the underlying bill to the provisions of this amendment. I yield back. Anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from New Jersey. All who favor the amendment, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no.
Aye.
No,
No.
The ayes appear to have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I request a recorded vote.
The requested